Wait, can y'all hear us?
Oh my goodness. Have we been going?
You've been your thing's been muted. Of course.
Of course.
Because I'm on this side of the screen.
Any other time you got them. Wow.
Well, let's do this again.
Let's do this again. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. We appreciate that.
Macia,
so much.
thank you.
Thank you, Macia.
Wow.
Listen, to be fair, I just woke up, so
There is that. And it's been a long day. And usually she's doing the background stuff, not me. So okay. So,
from the top.
From the top. Let it drop.
From the top.
Okay. What shouldn't have said? Anyway.
It's okay.
This is bad.
It's
This
okay.
is so bad.
It's not
This is
bad.
what happens when two friends get together. You just okay.
We're a mess. We're a mess.
So this is my girl. This is my girl, Liz. Liz is a female theology major. I think it's kind of bad that when we talk about women in ministry, we always have to preface it with, you are a female theology. Not just theology, you are a female
But that's a
theology
thing.
major.
That's a thing. So it's okay.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah.
Female theology major. She has worked at every level of ministry possible. And if you ask her, she will literally tell you she does everything. And that's the truth. That is the actual truth. She does everything.
Mercy.
And she works with a variety of ministries as well. Not only does she work with Forum, with AYS at Oakwood, but she's also one of the leads in Develop and the 2%.
ministry.
Yes.
2%.
So, I mean, she covers a wide range of ministries, and we are so fortunate to have you with us here today.
God is good. God is good. I've been fortunate and blessed to be able to sit around tables that most times means that I am the only female at that table. And so that's been a blessing, but I've always seen that as not just that I'm sitting there for myself, but I'm sitting there for the next female that comes along.
There you go.
Like, or not even for the next female that comes along, but like I'm sitting there for all of us. So, right. So because I'm at the table, like let's pull up a table and let another female sit there as well.
There you go.
Or pull up, hey, listen, we're going to build a table, but I'm at a chair.
We
can build the
We're going to
table.
make the table wider.
Listen,
Yeah.
We're going to build the table. We're going to bring up chairs. So it's been a blessing to just be able to, I'm from a very, I'm from a very outspoken Psalm 1 mother, and God has put a boldness in me that I have been blessed to be able to use. So I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. Like I said, I'm usually on the other side of this, but
I did tell you.
Well,
in the part 2, I didn't tell you
yeah.
that Liz has been involved with Burn the Golden Calf from the very beginning. Like, even though this is your first time seeing her on camera, she has been helping us run behind the scenes. She loaned me the ring light. She's helped me find guest hosts. Like, she has been involved in this from day one. And this is actually the very first time that we have had a female guest co-host. I mean, obviously, as a woman, women have always been represented here. But for this topic, discussing womanhood, I really felt it was important to bring the full force of womanhood, that women discuss womanhood.
Yes.
And I think one thing that most of us have heard, if you've been in the space, in Christian spaces, biblical womanhood. We've all heard it at some point or another that we should aspire to biblical womanhood. What comes to your mind when you hear that?
What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that look like? So what comes to my mind, right? So let's think. The Proverbs 31 woman, right?
Okay,
so that's one thing. They're always telling you to be like the Proverbs 31 woman. But the Proverbs 31 woman, like, sis is bad
to the bone.
She's taking care of her family. Like, she's making clothes. She's bringing in food. She's an entrepreneur, right?
She buys land.
Like, she's doing it all. And then so here we are. We're talking about the biblical womanhood, and are we talking about the Old Testament women? like, because they're bad as well, you know. We talk about Pua and Shifra, midwives, who refuse to do what Pharaoh told them to do. They're like, hold on, this doesn't sound right. Right?
We're going to defend our people. Yeah.
We're going to defend our people. We talk about Miriam, who led like her people in worship. You know, we talk about just women who continue to make strides and change things in their homes and in their lands and in their communities. And you know, Naomi, Ruth, you know, like they're not just, hey, I'm going to sit down and see what happens to me and let it happen. They're like, hold on. How do we change it? Like, how do we affect change? And so, yeah.
We have another guest with us, Daisy. Daisy, thank you.
Mercy, Jesus. Mercy, Jesus.
It's going to be one of those days. It's going to be one of those days. It's okay.
Gordon?
Anything that can't happen will happen. It's just one of those things. Usually, Daisy is the sweetest, quietest, most well-behaved dog. Usually. But today.
Listen. Them demons bothering Daisy right now.
Oh, my goodness.
She's going to go away.
There we go. All right.
Hang out somewhere else. She's like, Daisy agrees.
Put it up. Daisy agrees. There you go. That was our amen corner. There you go.
Yes, Daisy agrees. So yeah. So here we are talking about biblical women.
And I think it needs to be pointed out that when we're talking about, you know, biblical women in the Bible, that the Bible being a book written by men, predominantly about men, all the women in the Bible are written through the male gaze.
Right.
All of them are written through the eyes of men.
Yeah.
And so what would we have gotten had women been able to tell the stories of women? I mean, as much as we got, and as much as the women that are in the Bible are there because they are incredible, my goodness, what we may have missed because women didn't get to tell the story of other women.
But isn't God great? Like, I just can't help but be like, God is amazing. Because even though men wrote the Bible, like, you still get these amazing stories about women. I mean, so I had to do a girls' retreat this past weekend. I went to Seattle for 2 weekends in a row.
2 weekends in a row.
Mercy, Jesus. What do I do to myself? So I had to do a girls' retreat. And their title, their theme was Daughters of the Most High King. And when you're talking about Daughters of the Most High King, like, okay, that's cool, but like, who do we go to? And it's funny because for the last sermon of the retreat, I went to the book of Numbers, where the daughters of
Zelophehad, the daughters of Zelophehad,
girl, where they're like, they're like, listen, here's what it is. Like, our father has died. He was faithful to God, right? He didn't join the people who were going against God. And they're like, so how does it make sense that
he doesn't get an inheritance just because he doesn't have a son? Here's
the deal though, that I noticed, right? So they come speaking up for their father's name. They're like, why would our father's name be erased from the list? The Bible records their names.
Mercy.
The Bible literally says, like, and these are the 5 daughters.
Mercy.
And then it doesn't only record it in Numbers, but then it even goes to record it in Joshua. Their names get recorded twice. Like, women who have the audacity to speak up in an assembly full of men, right? Like,
and God co-signs because they're like, well, we don't know what to do with this. I mean, the women never did this before. What do we do with this? And God's like, do what they said. They're right. They're absolutely right.
Yeah. And how Moses is like, okay, I know this is the way things are done, but let me go talk to God. I'll be back.
Which does speak well of him, because there would have been some leaders who've been like, just no. And he's like, let me ask.
Silly rabbits. Chicks are Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. And I think that it is to be noted that most women who make it into the Bible are the women who are the extraordinary women. You know, the women who go above and beyond. They force themselves into the narrative. They are so above the ordinary that you cannot ignore their contribution
Mercy.
or, you know, their story. Like, you have to tell it. And I think that's interesting because, you know, again, it's almost like, you know, the model minority,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you have to be twice as good
Mm-hmm.
to get half as much.
Yes.
Jabez, for
Story of our
example, Jabez has how many books? And he has one little verse.
Yes. One.
We don't know anything about him other than this one little verse.
Listen, story of our lives. Story of our lives. You can be amazing, but you have to be twice as great as someone else.
There you go.
Ah, mercy. Yeah.
And how has that impacted us as we've gone forward? It feels as though a standard has been created for modern women that is based in this idea that is, I guess you could say, an Israeli-Palestinian is an antiquity. It's from a time when women lived in a structure that was about the male name, the male lineage. And so you are here to help advance the male lineage. It's not your name that goes in the book of, you know, so-and-so begat so-and-so, so begat so-and-so. It's like, no, you are just here to help advance his legacy. And now we have, modern women who are, to a certain, for a long time, expected to do something rather similar. You know, that you are expected to be, you know, the housekeeper, the homemaker, the good little wife, the highest privilege, the highest honor that could be bestowed upon you is to be a mother, you know,
Mercy.
to raise a generation. And we have now an army of women who are like, is that the only option?
And they look at us crazy. Like, what do you mean you don't want kids? You don't want to be married.
Let me hear you. We've got two young women here. We're not married. We're very happy.
Oh,
there is an idea floating around that single childless women are not happy. And the stats do not bear that out at all.
Yeah.
The stats say that single childless women are actually among the happiest women out there.
Listen, yes. And I love my godkids, my nieces and my nephews,
Absolutely.
right? I'm able to send them back to their parents. Like,
Absolutely.
I love you so much. You are my favorite person in the world. Now go back to mommy. Like,
there you go.
Yeah.
And I think it's rather difficult because as women of today, we haven't really been given a model of womanhood for today that comes from the Bible. Even though, as you pointed out, there are examples in the Bible of women who were entrepreneurs, business women, realtors, landowners, you know, all these things. It is there. Judges.
Like,
but it hasn't been given to us.
We have to go digging for them. And by chance, I trip and fall into a woman of the Bible and be like, oh, I found someone new. Like, wait, hold on. She did what? She drove a stake through someone's head? Oh,
I love that
Oh
story.
my goodness, that story. Like, oh, that's cool, you know? And so, yeah, it's funny because, okay, so there's a question here, or what is Macia saying? She's saying, which is interesting because with regards to legacy, there's usually no question to maternity. The way paternity is brought into question, it's always definitely mama's baby, but the man's name is passed on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And there are places, right, and cultures where people are actually known by their mothers because you can prove that that's your mom. You can't always prove that that's your dad.
There is that.
And so
there is that.
there are cultures where you are known as someone's daughter. Like I'm known as my mother's daughter in every way. And so that's a very interesting point that you bring up. The question is, we've always been given, right? We've always been given this biblical woman to live up to, but we haven't been given her true nature.
Yes.
We've been given who the patriarchal society wants us to be like.
There you go.
Right? Be meek, be gentle, be quiet, sit down. And it's just like, no, she wasn't. Listen, Sarah was like, she had her flaws, right? But she was literally like, oh, well, this baby isn't coming soon enough. She's making decisions in her home.
And what is interesting, I brought this out in the brief chat that we had in part 1 of Womanhood, is that when we tell the story of, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and of course it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that the promise has been given to Abraham, and God wants Abraham to have this child. And yet when we look at the total arc of Abraham's life, Abraham is able to have a child with anybody except Sarah.
Everybody.
Everybody. Having a child
Abraham
is not the issue. Like, he has a kid with Hagar. Then after Sarah dies, he remarries, has 6 more boys with somebody else. Having a child was never the issue. And so it's almost as though while God verbalized the promise to Abraham, the child that he wanted was Sarah's.
Yeah.
It's like, you can have 7 other kids. I want Sarah's kid.
Yeah.
And I wish that, we had a Bible that would unpack for us what's special about Sarah.
Yeah.
With all her flaws, like, no, God's like, no, her. I want her child.
Yeah.
And this is what I wish so many women could really hear and grasp, that throughout the Bible, God has been choosing women all along. There is this idea that women were meant to, stay home and stay in the tent and be quiet. And it's like, no, God has been choosing and ordaining women all along. God has been choosing women to literally lead armies into battle. God has been choosing women to lead the choirs that went before the army. God has been choosing women all along. And it is our interpretation of a few crumbs in scripture that have led women to believe that God has only chosen me to be a womb.
And crumbs that have but crumbs that didn't come from God, right? Crumbs that came from culture, crumbs that came from society. Yet God is like, no, I choose you.
There you go.
Like, come on, there's something special about the way that women care for people.
Yes.
So Jesus dies, right? And he's put into a tomb.
Mm-hmm.
And who's the first people to go, oh, let me go visit Jesus's tomb?
It's the women.
It's the women. And the angel is like, okay, now you guys go tell people.
There you go. There you go.
Come on.
There you go.
You women, you females, go tell people.
From the beginning to literally the end, the women were there the entire time. Now, I don't think that we can discuss women in the Bible without talking about Paul. Because anytime there comes a yes, but when it comes to women and leadership and moving forward, that is where we go.
And it doesn't matter how many times you tell people that it's wrong, right? You're like, look at the context. Let's look at historically what is happening in this church at this. I wasn't telling all the women to sit down and be quiet.
And see, for the longest time, when I was in my teens and early 20s, I did not like Paul. I felt that he was, a misogynist and
Don't tell Dr. Allen. Dr. Allen, we apologize. If this ever comes across you, I know you're not on social media, but we apologize. Okay? I do not stand with Jenny.
As Paul. I said, in my early teens, in my 20s, I have grown since then.
Yeah.
But because I took the words of Paul as were given to me, that I suffer a woman not to speak, that, a woman is, below the man because he is the head and she is the that, and you must submit. And because I believed it, and, people will, hand you Bible and they will show you that one verse. See, And if you don't know to study the context, if you don't know to delve deeper, you'll be like, oh my goodness, it does say that. Oh, well, then And so for a while, I really, really struggled with Paul. And it wasn't until I started, digging for myself and realized, wait a minute, this guy is actually a champion for women.
Yeah.
This guy is listing women as equal co-laborers with himself. Like not with, the other students. Like, no, with me.
Yeah.
These are my co-laborers.
Yeah.
He lists the women right there.
Yeah.
Or even, and I learned this recently, in the passage where he talks about, not suffering women to speak, but he says that let them learn, in silence. And I did not realize until I really began thinking about the context of the time, how revolutionary what he was saying really was.
Yeah.
Because today, when girls can go to school and can learn whatever, it's like, oh, okay, whatever. We focus on the silence, let them learn in silence.
Yes.
But we don't realize that for the time when women were not allowed to be disciples of rabbis and were not allowed to go into these schools, for a man to say, let them learn. That just because they are women doesn't mean that they are not able to grasp the word of God. Let them learn. And then once they have learned, don't be out here talking while you're ignorant. Don't do that. But once you've learned, let them learn, because once they've learned, they're able to be like all these other women who are my co-laborers in this ministry.
And that's huge.
Huge.
That's huge for someone to advocate for women to learn, like for women to be able to stand up, for women to be able to speak, like in that culture. And you're right, because even when he mentions couples, like it's always the woman first.
Yes.
And that even in its context, it's a big thing. And so Paul kind of gets, like Macia said, he's the most misunderstood man in the Bible. Yeah, he gets the bad,
a really bad rap.
Yeah, a really bad rap. And they're just, people come down and they use him. Listen, it's almost like what I said about Auntie Ellen. Like people will use her, and if she were to see the way that she was used, half the time she'd be like, I don't believe that. Because I honestly believe that this woman now, I'm switching a little bit. I'm pivoting into because I honestly believe that this woman, if she was around, would be at the front lines of a social justice movement.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Like, I mean, and so here we are talking about biblical women coming into what womanhood looks like in our day and age, but then also the roles of women within our church, within a church that was quote unquote founded, right? Co-founded by a woman.
Yes.
But yet we'll sit there and tell you that women cannot speak. And listen, I've come to the point, sis, where I'm just like, I don't need to defend my calling. Like I 100% believe that God has called me into this space.
And he has.
And I'm at this point where I'm like, I don't defend my calling. God does that. 100%. Like God does that. And how does God do that? God does that by just, I'm willing to be used.
There you go.
And God's going to do what God's going to do in this space, and I'm here for it.
There you go.
But as a woman, like it's hard, right? It's hard.
Girl,
it's comical, but it's hard.
Please understand that if you see a woman in ministry, particularly a woman who has not reached the celebrity status, we'll put it that way, because we have a few women who have reached celebrity status. And if you're going to bring a woman to speak, that's one of the first names you think of. But if you are a woman, but the majority of women have not reached that status, will never reach that status.
Yes.
When you see women in ministry who have not reached that status, who have not reached the place where their name protects them from some of the abuse, and even for those women up there, that you don't always get protected. So even for those women, there's stuff that happens that shouldn't happen. But when you look at these women, the very fact that you guys are still in the trenches, to me, there is no greater proof of the calling, because there are easier ways to make money.
Listen, there are easier ways to make better money.
There you go.
Let's put that out there.
There are easier ways to make a living. There are easier ways to minister. Like, you don't have to do that. You really don't. And so for women to choose to show up every day for, congregations and people who don't believe in their calling, who don't believe in their ministry, among colleagues who undermine them, who attack them, who don't give them their due, for crumbs. To me, there is no more obvious calling, because why would you do that if you weren't called?
Yeah. And see, there's a beauty in the fact that there's a sisterhood, right? One, there's a sisterhood, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like we also don't have the Pauls who speak up for us.
This is true.
Because I have so I'm a girl with brothers, literal biological brothers, right? But I also have just a bunch of like pastoral brothers who are always in my corner and who, when in rooms where my name gets spoken and they're like, oh yeah, Liz, let's bring Liz along. You know what I mean? And so those are important, like to have people who advocate for you.
This is true.
Because I have my village that comes through.
And that's important.
And so, yeah, that's really important. But God's going to use who God's going to use. Right. So what have you been finding out through your research?
So these are two of the books that I mentioned last week. This is A Year of Biblical Womanhood. Get a little bit closer to the camera. We're going to show. There we go.
So pretty.
A Year of Biblical Womanhood. And this is by Rachel Held Evans. And she decided to see what it would be like to go an entire year following all the examples and edicts set out in the Bible for women. So she's not going to cut her hair. She's going to practice the laws of being unclean, once you have your cycle, which, by the way, can we talk about
can we?
How that might not have been such a bad thing. I'm so sorry. I cannot touch the broom this week because I would make it unclean. I'm so sorry. I cannot cook dinner right now. I would make the thing unclean. I'm just going to sit here.
You would have so much fun with that. So much fun with that.
But yeah, all the things that, she went through trying to practice all these things that the Bible talked about for women. It's comedic, but it's also incredible when you really break down. It's like, you had to do that and that and that. That's a lot. That's a lot.
How did that work out for her?
Some of it was very challenging. I mean, when you literally go and sit on a roof because you're feeling contentious, Oh. She really, really committed to the journey. And it was like, had it been me, I think I would have done like maybe the month of biblical womanhood, or the quarter of biblical womanhood. I don't think I would have committed to an entire year. I'm
gonna have to borrow this.
It's good.
Yeah, I'm just kind of flipping through it. I'm like, oh yeah, no, definitely. This looks like something I'd like to read.
And having to cover your head, before you pray, and just all the things. But I think that when we're talking about women, there are so many things that are put on us. Like, I remember somebody talked about all the things that Ellen White says should be done in a day. And they said that if you gather all these things together, there are literally not enough hours in a day to do all the things. That there's this idea that women ought to be that while being the weaker vessel, while being the weaker vessel, we are also meant to carry the church and the home and the children and all these other things on our backs while being the weaker vessel and listening to somebody else and following their guidance.
But still live in your feminine energy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yes. Yes.
Still be in your soft era while you're at it. Yeah. No.
I bought a book once. I don't know if I still have it or not. I don't remember the title, but it was about becoming a feminine woman. And at the time, I was in a place where, I was searching, and so I was open. And I think back on it now, and it was like, they really advocated throwing tantrums if you were this is actual advice. This is actual advice from the book to women. They said to notice how differently men respond to them when they're upset than men respond to their daughters. And so they said that you should take notes from your daughter. Wow. And so, if you get upset with something that your husband does, instead of approaching it as you usually do, they're like, you know what, just stand there and stomp your little foot and say something like, oh, you beast, you brute, how could you? And toss your curls. I am so serious. This is literally the advice that was being given to women. That, you need to start wearing softer and nicer clothes, pastels, bows in your hair. Like, this is advice being given to grown women. And in the advice, because they were supposedly following this woman who decided to, adopt this advice because her marriage was in trouble. And so she's going to change. She's going to become softer and more feminine and all these things to save her marriage. And he will love her again. And in the end, yes, he does. Happily ever after.
Oh, Jesus. Jesus help us, please.
And here I am, this is what you do. Okay.
I could never. No, okay. I could never. I could absolutely never. What?
I cannot. I have to go and look and see if I still have this book
please.
Somewhere.
Wherever it's at, leave it in the hole that it fell into. Like, do not pick that thing back up. I could never.
But I will never forget. They're like, yeah, you just stand there and toss your curls, stamp your foot. You beast. How could you?
Yes, to be feminine is to be a big girl.
With a bow in your hair.
I'm a big girl now.
They said that you need to grow your hair out because men like, the longer hair,
And men wrote this book, didn't they?
No, I think it was a woman actually. And okay, I'm glad you brought that up because we have lived so long in this cycle of patriarchy and misogyny that many of us have drunk the Kool-Aid. We have bought into the okie doke.
So true.
Yeah. And that we have become participants in this system of oppressing other women because we now believe that, that's how you'll be saved, through childbirth. Yeah. And so we have women who will stand in the way of other women and will say, well, no. I remember being at a church and a lady asked me, what I did. And I told her that I was a theology major. And she's like, are you sure? I'm several thousands of dollars in debt. Yes. Yes, I am. Yeah. And it's hard because on the one hand, you want to his woman compassion because you bought into something that was given to you. It wasn't like no woman wakes up believing that she is inferior. No woman wakes up and comes into the world believing I am less than, I must lower my voice. No little girl comes into the world believing that. It is over time that these ideas and these mentalities get placed on us. And the longer it happens, the more it's just sad.
Yeah.
Did you get to see that one commercial where they took little girls and teenage girls and they asked the teenage girls to run like a girl? Yeah. And so, of course, the teenage girls go, oh, okay. And then they brought the little girls in, the really little girls, and they asked the little girls, run like a girl. And those little girls talk. I mean, they were smoking because they hadn't yet gotten the message that run like a girl means anything other than run as fast as you can. Yeah. But at some point, all of us get this message that like a girl is an insult.
You hit like a girl.
Mm-hmm. That like a girl is a slur.
You hit like a girl. I can definitely hit.
And it's like, you should be so lucky. You should be so lucky if you could be like a girl.
Yeah.
Like we say that we know that girls tend to mature at a faster rate than boys. Mm-hmm. And yet we ask girls to make accommodation for the boys rather than telling the boys, look to the girls as models of maturity and leadership. And so over time, it just over and over and over and over, these messages shape. And if you are in a religious circle, even more so. And
we are the only species that looks at our women and says that they are inferior. Imagine if a lion looked at a lioness and said, you're not good enough, because they do the hunting, right? Imagine if a gorilla looked at the mother gorilla and said, you're not good enough to protect your baby.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we're the only species who looks at our females and says, you are not good enough. And I wish, and it's not even a male versus female thing, because that's not what it is, right? Like, it's not, oh, the men, like, yes, the men wrote the Bible. Yes, they for so long have had influence, right? But at the end of the day, like you said, it's been indoctrinated even in women. So there's a story I heard once of this guy, and he tells this. He says, you know, when he was young, he goes to kindergarten, right? And so he gets to kindergarten, and they ask him, like, what do you want to be? And he says, I want to be my mom. And they're like, that makes no sense. What do you mean you want to be your mom? And he's like, yeah, I want to be my mom. And so he says, he comes back, you know, his dad comes to pick him up, and his teacher, who is a female, tells his dad that he answered that he wants to be his mom. And so his dad in the car, you know, asks him, little Jimmy, you know, little Jimmy, what do you mean you want to be your mom? Don't you want to be like your dad? And he says, no, I want to be like mom. And the dad says, what does that mean? How? And he said it never occurred to him in his mind to be like his dad, because in his head, his mom ran everything. In their home, she was the one who provided for them. She was the one who was with them. When he went to school, he had a female, you know, teacher. And he's just like, it never made sense to him. And so as he grew up, he started noticing, he's like, how is it that in our homes, my dad can't even, and not my words, his, my dad can't even find the keys to the car, but yet out in the world, he's the one running the corporations.
There you go.
Right. And so there's this shift that happens, and it's like, no, we're good enough.
Yeah.
You know, you're more than good enough.
More than good enough.
And
always have been.
Yeah. Not only are you good enough in your home, but literally the Bible says that you're good enough.
Yeah.
Like Jesus is like, no, you're good enough. God's like, yeah, you're good enough. Like Mary had Jesus, without a man. Like,
there you go. So Georgia said that, you know, man had nothing to do with it. Yeah. And even when you look at the ministry of Jesus, and much is made of the fact that, oh, well, Jesus only had, 12 male disciples. And it's like, no, Jesus had more than 12.
Yeah.
And they were not all male.
Yeah.
When we look at Jesus, even though Jesus was a male, Jesus was not too proud to accept the support of women
Mm-hmm.
at all levels.
Yep.
He accepted their financial support.
Yep.
He accepted their what's the word? Dietary? That's not a word. But when they make meals and stuff, he accepted that support. He was willing to be in their homes.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of him telling Martha not to tell Mary to leave was huge, because during that time, women did not sit at the feet of the
rabbi.
teachers. Yeah. Your place was in the kitchen. You're not allowed to be here among the men. And so for him to say, no, leave her alone. She's fine. She can sit right here and hear the talk, and she's fine, was incredible for that day and age.
Yeah. For
Jesus to be comfortable around women in a time when men would barely even talk to their wives in public. And Jesus was like, no, not only will I talk to the women, not only will I hold your babies, not only will I say, no, your children are allowed to be here, I will let you touch me too. I will let you buy me things and anoint my body. And if anybody tries to say that you're wrong, no, leave her alone.
Mm-hmm.
Leave her alone.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is such a huge advocate for women, and it's so unfortunate that narrative is often lost in the way we tell the story of Jesus.
Yeah. So even in a day and age where just to speak to women would have gotten you ostracized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so Jesus walks into the temple in Luke 13, and he's like, "Oh, woman who's been bent over for 18 years. This woman, it's just, oh my goodness. Like, I remember when Dr. Quasey was the one who literally was like, Liz, I need a sermon on this. And so I sat down and I looked at it, and he walks into the synagogue on a Sabbath, and he sees this woman who's been bent over for 18 years.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Like, you're in your community, you're in the church, you're in the temple, and you've been with this issue for 18 years. And they're probably every Sabbath over there teaching from sundown to sundown, teaching and doing their thing. And she's just there. Like, and in the midst of like all these men, of all these teachers of what's going on in the temple, Jesus literally stops and doesn't wait for her to address him, addresses her. Like, I'm like, hold up. Jesus addresses her. And it's just this beautiful picture of just a God who loves us, like a God who literally looks and values women, right? And Luke, I mean, listen, Luke's the man, because Luke is always writing in the Bible about women, about these unnamed women at that, like, and the woman, and the woman, and the woman. And it's just like, does the woman have a name? No, she's just the woman.
There's a bunch of random women.
We just have women everywhere. So, but Jesus takes the time to like speak to her and then release her, right? Like, and he does it on a Sabbath. So he does it on a Sabbath.
That healing a woman is sacred and belongs in the sacred space.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Or even the story of the woman with the issue of blood.
Oh my goodness, I love that story.
What I love is that the story begins and ends with a woman. It starts with a woman with the issue of blood, and it ends with him resurrecting a little girl.
Jairus' daughter. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and not just a full-grown woman who's done something in the world. No, a girl child. Like, no, you are worth my time.
Right.
Whether you are dead or alive, you are worth my time. You are worth my effort. And to think that, as you were talking about, the allies that we have, that Jairus is that ally, that he's willing to come out in the street and beg for the life of his daughter.
His daughter. Of his daughter.
His daughter.
Yeah.
Because we don't see that.
He's like, just say it. Like, just please, just say it. Like, yeah.
It's like, I want my daughter to live, and that he's broken over the life of his daughter.
Of a girl.
A girl.
Of a girl. Like, what? Yeah. I love the story of the bleeding woman. Like, again, someone who, when you think about these things, deformities, right, in the Bible, like, they're huge. So you got the bent over woman, you've got the bleeding woman, like, and it goes back to what you were saying about touching a broom and it being unclean. Like, can you imagine what her life was like? Can you imagine what that looked like? Like, you probably didn't have any friends.
Because nobody could come to see you because everything in your home is unclean.
Right.
And they would become ceremonially unclean. Yeah.
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 And she's just, and her faith to just be like, no, I don't need Jesus to stop and talk to me. I don't even need him to look at me. Like, can I just.
And out of all the people that are touching him, he's like, no, I felt hers.
That faith.
I felt hers.
To pull power from the Messiah.
Yeah. And then it's like, there's this idea that because you're bleeding, you're unclean. But because you touch me, I don't become unclean. You become clean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the story of, Jesus rescuing the woman caught in adultery. And he's like, don't think I don't know that you set her up.
Yeah.
Don't think that I don't know that this has nothing to do with her and everything to do with the fact that you're trying to trap me. Don't think I'm going to let you kill her as a pawn to try to get to me. No.
Yeah. That's totally going to be one of my questions for Jesus when I get to heaven. I have a list. I have a list of questions that I'm going to ask Jesus. And one is really, what did you write? Like, Jesus, when you bent over and used your finger to write, like, what did you write? Like, what got to them? Because people have taken creative license with that, right? Like, they're like, oh, he's probably writing their sins. But I'm just like, Jesus, what did you write? Like, did you write their mama's names? And here are the names of your mothers. Like, what did you write, Jesus?
And think like, this is not TMZ list.
I'm just like, oh, because I mean, as a female living in 2023, like half the time I sit back and I look at like when people do things and I'm like, do you not have a mother? Do you not have a sister? Do you not have a wife or a daughter at home? Like, how do help me make it make sense? Make it make sense, because the math isn't mathing for me right now. At all. Yeah, it's Jesus. Oh, gosh, the biblical woman.
The biblical woman. It's absolutely amazing. He wrote down the bodies.
He was like, listen, and Josh, 45. Yeah, no, listen. Let us not.
I was like, let me write down the name of the man you didn't bring. You think I don't know?
Yeah. And here's his name. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Jesus.
But, always an advocate for women. I mean, even when you think of the story of him with the woman at the well, and his disciples show up, and the Bible's like, you need to know, we were astonished. We were astonished. Let it be known, we were astonished. He was talking to her.
A Samaritan woman at that. Not just any woman, like.
They're like, no, the biblical record
of the Assyrians.
We need the record to show we were not there when that happened.
Yeah.
I love it. That when you really begin delving into the Bible, when you really begin reading these stories, you find a womanhood that is completely different from the soft, docile, passive image that has been given to us of womanhood. It's completely different. We were the women, like you said, who were bringing down war generals with only a tent peg or a millstone. Yeah. We were the women who said, you know what? No, the armies are going into battle and I'm going to be in the chariot with you.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is that wasn't even her choice. You bring up Deborah, but that wasn't even her choice. She was not the one saying, I am going to war with you.
Mm.
She was like, hey, Barack, God said for you to take, how many was it, 10,000 of these men and go into war.
Mm.
And he's like, yeah, I'm not going without you. And that alone is a testament of her relationship with Christ. Of her, not even Christ at that point. It was God. Right? Because this is pre-Christ.
Yeah.
So that was a testament of her own relationship with God.
Mm.
Of Barack, a man, a general, to say, yeah, I'm not going without you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he understood. He understood.
The respect that these men had for these women.
Yeah.
Listen, to be like, no, there is absolutely no shame to have you in the chariot with me. As a matter of fact, I think I will be safer with you in the chariot with me.
Yeah.
No, you come with us.
Yeah. And so we have two women in that story, right? Because then she's like, I'll come. She's like, but the glory's not yours. It's going to go to a woman. And then so, Jael does what she does with Sisera. But it's funny because about a year ago, I was listening to a podcast, just a real quick plug. I believe it's Adventist Next out of Andrews, and they don't do it anymore. I think it's done. But I think it was probably episode 2. It might be episode 1, but I definitely remember episode 2. They touched on women. And it's such a good podcast. But they talked about how, like, literally in order for Christian history to be what it is today, like, they had to erase women. There was this erasure that happens. And I can't speak too much on it because, like I said, it was a year or 2 ago that I listened to it. But I remember when you had asked me to be on this, I was like, oh, I should go listen to that. But then, life happens. Yeah, I didn't listen to it. So I can't really quote anything from it. But it's a really good listen. I remember that much because I remember listening and being like, oh, wow, this is interesting stuff. And just knowing that God uses women.
Yeah.
Point blank, period.
Point blank, period. I mean, the church as we know it would not exist without women. Most churches are predominantly women. If you don't have women, you don't have a church. The majority of the work done in the church is done by women. Yeah. The majority of the programs and the leadership training that happens, especially when we're talking about leadership training of our smallest members, is done by women. Yeah. And so I saw recently on Instagram, it was this clip that talked about how our society is patriarchal. And there is this idea that if it became matriarchal, it would just be a flip. That, then women will be in charge and the women will be doing everything that men are doing and just be women. And it's like, no, that matriarchy is a completely different setup. It's a completely different way of being than patriarchy, because where patriarchy is hierarchical, it's top, matriarchy is collaborative. Yeah, it's all of us. And what patriarchy it promotes power. That's what it really focuses on. Who's in charge? Who makes the final call? Matriarchy prioritizes the children. It prioritizes the next generation. And this is often why when you look at, you're talking about, the animal kingdom, many of the animals that live the longest and are the most peaceful are the animals that have matriarchal structures. Elephants, who are there with mother, daughter, grandmother, all of them together, helping raise each generation, monkeys that, all of these structures. When women are the ones who are leading out, it is more peaceful, it is more collaborative, and the children do better. Children do better because they recognize that we don't have a future if we're not prioritizing our children. Yeah. And this is why, there was a discussion about women and their earnings. And they were saying that one of the reasons why women don't earn as much as men is because women choose careers that are low paying, but they are the careers that society needs to function. We need our teachers
Mhm.
and our nurses and our social workers. You know, these are the areas, and our nursery workers and you know, people who are taking care of grandma, you know,
Right.
while they don't pay a lot, they are the things that keep society going.
Mhm.
And I think I want to say it was in Sweden. There was a country.
You love the Swedish. That's
I really enjoyed my time there, girls. I'm not even gonna lie. I would go back in a heartbeat. I think it was Sweden, where the women went on strike. All the women went on strike. Like, we're not doing anything. We're not working out in the home, and we're not working at home either. We're going to do nothing. And in a matter, I think it was like a day or two, they're like, oh, this is awful. Oh yeah, no, this won't work.
Oh yeah.
This won't work. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Because again, we have a society where it's like, where are my keys? Where are my pants? Where are my wallet? If women just like, no, figure it out. Yeah. Society ground to a halt. We need women.
Yeah. And that's not to say that we don't need men.
This is true. This is very true. So, speak on that.
And that's not to say that we don't need men.
Speak on that.
Because we need men. Mm-hmm. I make a joke and I'm like, I need my pickle jar open. That's a joke. No, but we need men, you know? Mm-hmm. And so it's not to say that, like you said, there's this patriarchal idea that, like, if it were up to women, like, we would get rid of all the men. No, we're not trying to build an Amazonian, you know, world. Like,
not everywhere.
It'd be pretty bad. It'd be pretty lit, but that's not what we're here for. You know, there's a certain level of care that I get from my brothers.
Yes.
That's very different from what I get from my sisters.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a difference.
And so but there's a certain level of care that I get from my brothers. Mm-hmm. And I love it. Like, with my brothers, like, there are things that I never have to worry about. Listen, I had to go get my brakes changed this week. And I literally was like, I've never had to do that without my brother. Like, and I'm just like, oh, yeah. Usually that's something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's not to say that, hey, we want women to be better than men. It's to say, hey, we want equality.
Yeah, we want unity. We want us to work together.
Yeah. I want us to be, listen, I get it. There will be roles, right? It's like a marriage. There's roles.
Because there's some things that you're better at than I am. And those
I might be better
aren't based on gender. Yeah. Right. They're not based on gender. It's just who you are and who I am.
Exactly. Yeah. They're not gender roles. They're person roles.
There you go. There's what this union needs.
And so it's like, no, I'm not saying do away with the men, off with their heads, you know?
Yeah.
But joint heirs to the kingdom. Yes.
Yeah.
Right? We are joint heirs. Like, woman, man, woman, man. Like,
and there's this when we go back to the very beginning, the idea that God made man and woman in God's image.
But God made man first. Let me stop. Come back later.
Well, here's the thing. And I actually said this in a sermon once. We want to talk about it. It's like, okay, so God made man out of dust, but God makes woman from bone. And when everything else is gone and we're 1,000 years down the road, dust is gone, but bone remains.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Someone said it was a trial and error. Okay,
we're being silly now.
But yeah,
this is a joke.
right. Let's tell people that, please. I promise. I love men.
Yeah, but we're meant to be together. women by themselves
Mhm.
cannot be an accurate representative of God, and
Yes.
men by themselves
Mhm.
cannot be an accurate representative of God. It is when we are united. It is when we are together. And this is why God called them, not him, not her, them, Adam. He meant for us to be in this
Mhm.
together.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, we don't need more men getting their tiki torches talking about you will not replace us. Like, no one is trying
I don't want to
to.
replace you. Right.
No one is trying to.
Yeah.
What we need is a world where we work together. Now, that will mean a lot of change. And I think right now, our society and men in our society are struggling with the change. But it could be such an empowering change.
Mhm.
I mean, and I just had a discussion that's putting it nicely, with a gentleman the other day.
What is this? Okay. I'm sorry. The air quotes killed me.
Listen, go to my page. You'll see there's a little thing. You'll see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
About, women and men and their earnings and their value and, who should be up. And I think that for a very, very long time, the value of men was based in provider. And I've heard this in so many sermons, a good man is a provider. You provide for your family. This is what makes you a man, And so it was essentially money.
Mm-hmm.
Money is what makes you a man. And now we are in a place where, because women have more economic agency than they used to, they are now able to be their own providers. And so now looking at men, it's like, what else? What else? And that's scary. That's scary if the one thing that, made you man and made you thing isn't there anymore. But I think that it provides this opportunity for men to become so much more, because you are more than your paycheck. You are more than your career. You are meant to be so much more than whatever crumbs capitalism gives you, You're more than that. Yeah. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity, if society will take it, for all of us to be able, what is the more that we were meant to be? God was obviously thinking of more when he put us here together. What is the more?
Yeah, because even when you're watching like these podcasts with like men sitting around a table, right? Like there's even these conversations about them having spaces to be vulnerable. That's needed.
Very needed.
And so the way that society is progressing, like you get the chance to be vulnerable, right? You have these spaces where you can be, where you don't have to be the strong provider. We're breaking down these walls. So not only are we breaking them down for women, but we're also breaking them down for men. Across the table, across the board, let's look at what this means for all of us and these so-called gender roles.
I mean, Louis Farrakhan said that, when you uplift women, you build a nation. And oh my goodness.
Yes.
And
I love that quote.
Especially now as we are going into the holiday season. Oh, I'm trying to wrap up. We're running out of time.
We are out of time.
We're out of time. Wow. See what happens when you're with your girlie? This is what happens. See?
When we take these conversations live. Yeah. We have these conversations all the time.
All the time. Okay, we're going to say this last thing and then we're closing out. We're going to close. But as we are coming into the holiday season, statistically, suicide rates go up during the holiday seasons. And one of the topics that we're going to be discussing in the next few weeks is suicide. Statistically, women attempt suicide at a higher rate than men, at a much higher rate than men. But statistically, men succeed at suicide at a higher rate than women. there is a need for us to become unified in helping each other experience our humanity. There's a need. There's a need, because if we can begin working together, so many women will not need to attempt, and so many men won't need to succeed. That's not what God was thinking when he put us here. That's not what God was thinking when he put us here. And if we can come together, men and women, equally united, what a difference we can make in our world. How completely different our world would be. Yeah.
Praise Jesus.
Amen.
Praise
Amen.
Jesus.
Oh man. Well, yeah, we have gone a little bit over time. Thank you for those of you who hung out here with us.
The one, man.
Nacia, she's a real one. You're the real one.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you, Liz, for being here, for coming, for sharing. I am so grateful for you being my friend. Yes. We gotta do the gym sometime.
About that.
Yeah. But thank you for those of you who joined us, for the live or who will be watching later. We will be back next week, same place, same time, for another topic as we burn the golden calf. Have a wonderful rest of the week. We'll see you next Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.